I abandoned my family and I am okay with it. I'm composing this from my RV outside a cafe with free internet service. I've gone over this in my brain a million times, but I assume putting it down might help me clarify my views. I left my family a little more than a week after D-Day. My wife is 36 years old, I am 37 years old, and my daughter is 13 years old. It's been almost 6 months since that day. I stumbled into her affair by accident. I was completely bewildered. I thought we had a nice marriage. We had a lot of closeness, we would chat about things for hours, and we had date nights on a regular basis. We had both common and individual interests. We were in terrific health and fitness. Was it good? Or was it just me thinking that? My wife, let's call her Eve, cheated. Thus she clearly favored another guy over me. And she couldn't possibly love me if she could betray me like that. I was thinking she was my best friend, but it turns out she wasn't. In retrospect, I can see that I was probably seeing everything through rose-colored glasses. I honestly thought my family cared about me. I thought I was adored. I think I was the idiot. I arrived home late from work because I had to attend a safety training class. She was dozing on the couch when a message with emojis appeared on her phone. Emojis like the ones I'd use if I texted her. I stooped around and discovered what had been going on for at least 5 months. I knew the AP, let's call him Adam, since he was a co-worker of hers. I'd even went to his place for a BBQ and met his family. He was married with 3 children. The youngest is just 2 years old. Something suddenly clicked in my thoughts while I was reading the messages. It drastically altered my life. I went from adoring Eve more than everything to loathing her to becoming blank when reading her letters. It's not just about her, it's about everything. I went to bed completely numb, took photographs of the messages, and didn't sleep at all, only gazed at the ceiling. The following day, Eve was irritated because I went to bed without waking her up. She complained of neck ache as a result of lying on the sofa all night. I wasn't really listening. I just remember thinking about how muted everything sounded. As though the world's volume had been turned down. I was taken aback by how little I cared. I felt almost nothing. Shouldn't I be angry? I didn't say anything at breakfast as my wife and daughter spoke. They didn't appear to notice anything out of the ordinary about me, or even recognize my existence. But I wasn't feeling like myself. I felt like I was someone new, someone I didn't know or understand, dressed in the old me's outfit. I went through the motions of everyday life, went to work, and did all the usual things. The only change is that I kind of stopped speaking. Unfortunately, I realized that no one appeared to notice. It's as though I never existed. I began to realize that even my daughter did not really love me. I was in the home with them, but they didn't really engage with me until they needed something from me. They spoke at me rather than with me, if that makes sense. I'd experienced these agonizing aches that would come and go. They would utterly overwhelm me at times. I wasn't feeling well. I wandered around like this for 5 days until Eve inquired if anything was wrong over dinner. I think I'd only spoke 3 words to her and my kid throughout that time. I didn't even respond to her query. Instead, I made a "I'm fine/don't know" expression and started eating. She seemed to be okay with it. I didn't go to work the following day. I worked for the local power company, where I maintained power lines and other things. I'd brought several other items as well as my camping/hunting gear. I didn't have much of a plan. I placed it in my vehicle and drove about the neighborhood for a time, eventually ending up at the kitchen table, waiting for my wife to get home. She arrived home with a few bags of goods and began unloading by telling me about her day. I was simply sitting at the kitchen table in agony. Apart from a brief glimpse when she entered the kitchen, she didn't even look at me. Daughter came in and did the same thing. Their backs were turned to me, and they were discussing some petty item for sale. I've never felt so rejected, undervalued, or alone in my life. I felt completely invisible, as if I weren't there or didn't deserve to be acknowledged. I was reflecting on our lives, and all I could see was that they didn't give about me. They probably never did, since I was just a bystander in their lives. They didn't care about me. I was a helpful and convenient prop. I was struck with a wave of anguish, wailed, but they didn't care, so I became angry, extremely enraged. I rose up, grabbed a glass of water, and flung it hard against the tiles over the sink. It simply blew up, and glass fragments showered down on everything. They both whirled around, furious. What the H? When they saw my distorted, tear-soaked face, they paused, wondering what to do. It was awkwardly silent for a long time before I spoke. "Eve, I know everything about your infidelity with Adam. I was astonished at how clear it came out, since I was clenching my jaw so tightly that it ached. "What?" my daughter asked Eve. "Is that correct, Mom?" Eve began to attempt to explain. She gave me a short look and replied, "Sorry, I can explain." Then she returned her attention to our daughter, and they began squabbling. It was like if I was invisible or something. "Hello. Here comes the glass thrower." After a few minutes of watching their increasingly heated argument, I simply walked out and into my car, looking out the window at them as they continued to argue in the kitchen. They had no idea I had departed. I remained there for a few more minutes before giving up and driving away. Eve attempted to phone me after about 15 minutes, then call after call after call, then a deluge of messages from both of them. I simply ignored it and eventually turned off the phone. The next day, I grabbed half of our money and contacted my supervisor. I told him I wasn't sure when I'd be returning. He warned me I'd be fired if I didn't show up. I simply said okay and hung up. I just didn't care. When I arrived at Adam's house, his wife opened the door. I handed her a copy of the mails and informed her about Adam and my wife's activities. I left her sobbing on the stairwell. At the end of the day, I found myself at a small motel on the outskirts of town. The next few days were a blur as I tried to make sense of everything. I didn't make any significant progress. I was mostly staring at the wall, trying to come up with reasons not to commit suicide. Eve's older brother is a police officer. We'll name him Bob. I'm not sure whether Bob arrived on the third or fourth day. I'm not sure how he discovered me. He attempted to question me, but I remained silent. When I didn't respond, he informed me that I was under arrest and placed me in handcuffs. However, he did not take me to the station as I had anticipated. Instead, he drove me home. Bob dragged me into the living room, where my wife and daughter began berating me right away. Still, I remained silent. I just sat there in awe as they told me how terrible this was for them, when I was a terrible a-hole for making them worry. It went on for a while until Eve yelled at me, "Say something." I looked at her for a moment before saying calmly, "I have nothing to say to you." Bob became enraged and slammed me against the wall, screaming at me not to speak to his sister in that manner. Bob's violent reaction gave me a lot of satisfaction. I'm not sure why, but it made me so happy that I burst out laughing. Bob's wife had left him 4 months before. I gave Bob a friendly smile. "Bob, you're pathetic. Did you beat your wife to Bob? Is that why she abandoned you?" Bob slammed into me and knocked me out. Wife and daughter began screaming in unison. As I stood up, I couldn't stop laughing. I couldn't stop myself. I was bleeding from somewhere on the floor when I noticed it. I'm still handcuffed and laughing. Perhaps it was the absurdity of it all. I spat blood in Bob's face and yelled, "Bob." He hit me again, this time hard enough to knock me out cold. In the hospital, I awoke. When I opened my eyes, I puked all over the floor, so I knew I'd suffered a concussion. Eve, Bob, and my daughter were there, and they were speaking to me in a way that I couldn't understand. They were ordered to leave by a nurse who emerged. She got me a pan to puke in and summoned help to clean up. I informed her that my family had brought me here and that they were not to come close to me while she was checking my pulse. That I'd leave if they came back into the room. I'd just run away. She argued sort of strongly that running or simply getting up was an extremely poor idea for me. She would, however, speak with security. It was bliss not to see them again in the hospital. I could finally think, and I felt a little better. I was thinking of maybe reporting Bob to have him fired, but it's a tiny town. His coworkers would most likely cover for him. I pondered addressing my wife, but it also didn't make sense to me. I chose to vanish, to become a ghost, since I didn't want to see these individuals again. I sent each of them a letter and told Bob that if he troubled me again, I would report him. I informed my daughter that Eve had deceived me and that she would no longer have a father. I wrote a lengthy letter to Eve. I made an effort to be as practical as possible. I told her I was going to sell the home, that I wouldn't be paying the mortgage or utilities anymore, and so on. I told her that reconciliation, or even contact, was out of the question, especially since she had sent her brother to drag me back and beat me senseless in front of them. I explained that I wouldn't do anything for her ever again, so if she wants a divorce, she will have to arrange it. I told her I was going to vanish and didn't want to be discovered. That if she interferes with my life again, I will simply end myself. That we will never speak again. I ended it with how much she had hurt me. I really regret giving her that last sentence. It's like I let her steal a little bit more of me, like I let her give me a little more pain. In the hospital, I made a plan on how I could disappear. Eve gave the hospital some fresh clothes that they forwarded to me. Then one evening I just went out the rear fire escape. I triggered some kind of alarm. I was panicking a bit, but thankfully no one stopped me. I got back to the hotel to pick up my car. I traded it with a small RV and set off. I got a new phone. The only person I called was my father. I told him everything and told him if he gave my new number to anyone, I would become totally unreachable, forever. He could call me if he needed to reach me if I needed to sign something. Other than that, I wanted to be left alone. For the first few months, I grieved the loss of my old life, but I came to realize that I grieved the loss of a fantasy. A memory that only existed in my head. The loving wife and daughter, the family, friends. It was all just an illusion in my head. These people never really cared for me. Over time, I began to rebuild a type of existence. Only this time, I was a complete ghost. I ghosted all of society. Now, I am merely a PO box. I hire a safety deposit box to hold valuables and cash. I perform odd things for money. I hunt and fish and scavenge. My money use is small, therefore, my cash reserves are really expanding. I don't pay taxes. I don't have a bank account. And they asked my name, I replied, folks call me Fred. It's not my name. I go out of my way to not contribute to society or anything else for that matter. I am still invisible, as I was in my family. At least now I am invisible to strangers, not folks that pretend to adore me. And to be honest, I sort of enjoy it now. I make my own beer, I wander about, I have no responsibilities. I work when I want. I spend a lot of time in nature simply resting. I have a few pals who I hunt and fish with. I am in excellent form, the best shape of my life, honestly. All in all, my life is becoming better. At least now, no one is exploiting me for nothing but their personal profit while pretending they care about me. I don't know what happened to my wife and kids, my old pals, or the rest of the family. I don't know if I am divorced now or if I owe child support. I don't know what happened to the home. I don't really care. My father has attempted to offer me information a couple times, but I shut it down firmly. He is the only one I talk to periodically from my prior life. I feel free, calm, comfortable, I may say delighted even. I don't have much, but I don't need much. When I reach to the end of the line, I will sell everything and burn the remainder of my money. I will make sure there is nothing of value left, nothing left to remember me by. Then I will wander into a national park without no one ever knowing and vanish forever. Sometimes I go to retail malls, railway or bus stops, and simply study the people. There I see them, all the guys like I used to be. The guys who are giving themselves to a society and families that don't give about them. Men that labor themselves to death without any acknowledgement or thanks from anybody. They are guilt-tripped, pressed, and pushed to constantly produce more, sacrifice more. More and more worthless rubbish, brand clothing, larger home, more this, more that. Never even getting a thank you, no form of gratitude or appreciation. In most instances, not even a grin. They attempt to delude themselves, just as I was, refusing to see truth. But I see it in them, just as I used to, deep down they know. I know their vacuous million-mile gaze, I used to have the same one. This felt nice to get my chest. Thank you for listening.